Hi there. Welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today on the Mushroom Hour podcast, we are blessed to be joined by Kim and Zach Hunter, who represent the Fungivore down in Oaxaca, Mexico, and they're going to be sharing with us their learnings from mycophilic cultures around the world, and maybe some new ways of being for us that come from some very old teachings. So Kim and Zach, thank you so much for joining us on the Mushroom Hour.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
It was such a joy to be able to get to speak to you beforehand and learn about your work. But as a podcast host, it almost makes it more complicated because now I have about 50,000 more questions. So just to get us framed, though, tell us a little bit about your journey, how you ended up in Oaxaca. Take us through a little bit of that arc.
Well, I've been I worked in kitchens from like the time I was 14 years old until having my own restaurant in Santa Cruz. And at that time, started really getting into Oaxacan cuisine, though I'd never been here before. So I started cooking out of Diana Kennedy's book, Oaxaca Augusto. And it's just moles and all these things, and herbs and all the region. It's like, what is this area? This is so fascinating. I need to get down here. And didn't really know, I guess, the difference between Mexican food and Oaxacan food in particular. And was realizing that the Mexican food I'd grown up with was not actually what Mexicans eat. And so with the restaurant, we started expanding that and looking into a bunch of other things. And that led me to wanting to go to Mexico, which I did in 2017 and met Kim in 2018. And I think by 1 year in, we've been to Mexico 5 times together.
We kind of fell in love with Mexico as we fell in love with each other.
And she was on a separate journey falling in love with Mexico and actually had moved in with me in Portland. And February, she was like, I'm done with this cold.
It's too cold. I can't handle it.
There's no mushrooms. It's just cold. I'm out. And she booked us a flight to Oaxaca and a trip to Oaxaca, Mexico, I guess we went for the month. And from the moment we got here, it's just magic. It just when you go into a place and you're like, wow, this is all working. Everything feels great about this. That was our experience coming to Oaxaca. And we ended up doing our first mushroom tour that year, 2019, with Alan Rockefeller. And Alan had been presenting at Soma Camp every year about his summer in Mexico. And I was like, summer mushroom season? That's amazing. I want that. And so I'd asked Alan if he would be our expert if I put together a group tour. And he said, sure. And then we let him basically guide us as to where to go, because he knew Mexico better than we did. He said, we should go here, we should go here. We started at the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival, which is the longest running mushroom festival here in Mexico since 2001. So this was 2019, its 19th year. And the trip went really, really well. We also met, on just the foray alone, we met most of the partners that we work with today. That's right,
We were on a foray together for 4 hours, all got to know each other, all stayed in touch. Yeah. And when we came back to Mexico in 2021 to restart the tours, all of them were like, let's do this. We're so excited.
Yeah.
So it was also about finding enthusiastic partners who also shared a love for mushrooms and wanting to bring mycophilic people together and to bring people to see these communities in the mountains here that have a very different culture than what we do in America.
I mean, it should be said that the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival probably had 500 people at it. I mean, it was a huge affair. That first one was like, Oh, wow, okay, there's something going on here. This is very well organized, a big mushroom hunt, a competition for species, mycologists, and an ID table, the whole thing. It was like, okay.
This is too funny because my only journey to Oaxaca, Mexico was in 2019. And we went in the fall for a friend's wedding. And
be like, were you there?
We just missed it. So we actually were in Oaxaca, and so funny. Everyone else, this was like a way over the top destination wedding with the super rich family, and they had all these people come out. They rented buses. They rented out like an old limestone factory to hold their thing. But while everyone else was getting excited for almost these like touristy, resorty kind of planned affairs, which were still beautiful and magical. I mean, Oaxaca is just a magical place in terms of the architecture. I love the beautiful color palette of a lot of those kind of Spanish buildings. But while people were getting exciting for that, my wife was secretly talking to our hotel concierge and figuring out where can we go and find mushrooms. and they booked us a tour, a driver and then a tour in Cuajimoloyas. And we got there, and I was so surprised by kind of how different it is in that there's like a mushroom office where you go and register and you get ready for your tour. And the guy was telling me, oh, you just missed the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival. You're kind of missing our season. So that is too weird that was like, you guys, we missed each other by a couple months in 2019.
That's funny. Amazing.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting that you were sort of brought up into the office because, that is the Sierra Norte. So Cuajimoloyas is in the Sierra Norte. It's a couple hours outside of Oaxaca City. And you're right, a lot of Oaxaca's tourism is based in the city.
Yeah.
And what you don't see is just how incredible the communities in the mountains and the nature and sort of a different way of life that you're never going to experience if you just stay in the city of Oaxaca. And so for us, it was also about bringing people to more communities. Like Cuajimoloyas is known for its mushrooms, but there are, 8 plus, 10 plus communities in that vicinity, all that share the same forest and also have the capability to host tourism that benefits the whole community. So for us, when we sort of coming back to Oaxaca, that's what we wanted to do, is how do we get deeper into places like Cuajimoloyas, connecting with the Hongueras, and really a lifestyle which during rainy season, mushrooms are a major part of their diet.
Well, I think you went on a trip that kind of popped your noodle a little bit in October of 2019. It was a women's trip called Once or Once Women's Journeys. And Kim said she got into a conversation with a young boy, like a 5-year-old, and she was showing him pictures of mushrooms. And he was like, oh, yeah, we have those too. And she was like, oh, when's your season? And he just looks at her like, when it rains.
Yeah, what do you mean?
That's like...
Yeah, because I'm like, tell me what months, tell me what weeks, like when are we going to go? And he just looks at me like, when it rains.
I mean, it's just like the simplicity of that deep knowledge of like, when it rains, we go look for mushrooms. It's so perfect. And that was sort of that we'd done the one tour of Cuajimoloyas, but this was up in Hidalgo, or
no, that was in La Chita.
Oh, that was in La Chita. Okay, cool. So it's been a thing for a long time. There's a Frenchman that helped set up the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival back in 2001, and I think he's since moved to another state. But now there's like during mushroom season, there's probably 5 or 6 mushroom festivals happening every single weekend, all around Mexico. I mean, it's insane now. It's impossible to go to them all. It's like every weekend because there's only so many weekends when it's raining.
So that's why having sort of your ear to the ground it's a lot of trying to stay on top of things.
Right.
Well, and it seems like mushrooms kind of pervade the culture, even if there's not a festival, right? Which even in 2001, to me, that doesn't sound super old. But of course, their traditions go back hundreds of years. So this idea of maybe holding festivals and celebrations just around mushrooms might be a little more recent than kind of the embedded nature of mushrooms in their culture.
I would say that's probably accurate. I mean, it seems like associations and clubs and festivals are more of a Western way of approaching things. Although there is definitely a strong interest in, so the Sierra Norte is unique in the like 3 kind of major mountain regions of Oaxaca that are touristed in that. And I should probably learn the history of this more, but all these 8 towns that are part of what's called the Mancomunados, it's 8 towns that work together, share forest management together, and all of those towns at some point had these really amazing adobe cabins built that are, we call it rustic chic. It's super comfortable. They bring you 3 hours of firewood at a time. There's like a restaurant usually surrounding right in those same cabins. So it's really easy to bring people up into the mountains, which is not the case for like the Mixteca, which also has an extensive mushroom history, but there's no place to stay up there outside of the cities. And so it's hard to get out into the wilderness and stay there versus in the Sierra Nortes, it's like designed specifically for ecotourism. That's what they've sort of made their focus on.
And I want to dive into some of those land management practices. That article you sent was fascinating about forest management practices. Cool, right? But before I forget this piece, what was it like updating your kind of Americanized notions of edible and gourmet mushrooms when you got to Oaxaca. Maybe it was that first Cuajimoloyas festival, but I remember being shocked, like I told you guys, that the woolly chanterelle was something they loved, and I was like, huh?
Yeah.
So what was that little bit of mushroom culture shock like?
Well, I want to say actually it started in Thailand in terms of
what people eat.
In terms of what people eat.
Yeah, I guess we hadn't really. I mean, because the Amanita Caesarea family is really common here, and at the time of the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival, the primary edibles are porcini and these shining red, beautiful amanitas. Frankly, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone out there, I don't find the indigenous methods of cooking mushrooms to be that appetizing or that showcasing of the mushroom flavor itself. And I think that's because they treat it as sustenance. It's nutrition from the forest that you cook and eat during season. It's not like this showcase the mushroom and make it shine.
I'll tell you though, those pan-fried porcinis.
Pan-fried porcinis.
Cuajimoloyas. So I don't know. I might differ in my opinion.
Pan-fried porcinis might be a simple gourmet, kind of elevated to another level. You hinted at something there too, and I don't want to skip over this. I asked you about this journey to Oaxaca, and you mentioned Thailand. And I know that's a significant stopover in this love affair with Oaxaca. So Kim, tell us a little bit about that maybe. How did Thailand come into the frame? And then, tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, so our time to Oaxaca actually took several years to get here because of the pandemic. We had planned to move to Oaxaca in 2020, had given up both of our apartments in Portland and San Francisco.
No going back.
Had put our stuff in storage, had our friends looking at after our cars, and we were going to Thailand in early of 2020. I was marrying some friends. We just were doing a couple things there. And it was supposed to be a 10-week trip. And then when we got back, we were going to start to make the move to Oaxaca. And while we were in Thailand, the world, flipped upside down. And the reality of doing tours in 2020 was completely off the table. The reality of crossing a border was off the table. The reality of even coming back to the U.S. and having a place to quarantine was out of the picture for us because you couldn't stay with friends. And Airbnbs were costing like $10,000 for a month to try and rent in some places. Yeah. So
and there was no work.
There was no work.
I had a restaurant in Santa Cruz, as I mentioned earlier, until early 2018, from 2016 to 2018. And then I had moved back to Portland and restarted doing private chef work, mostly cooking for retreats for like 5 or 6 days for a group of people in the house. And obviously that wasn't happening during the pandemic.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening. And so everything that we could do to even support ourselves in the U.S., much less having a home, there was no real option for going back. And we had set ourselves up to not go back.
Yeah. So when we got the alert from the State Department saying, come home now or prepare to shelter in place. Without any help. We made the decision that we would stay in Thailand.
And shelter in place. And so our 10-week time in Thailand actually turned into 80 weeks. 80 weeks in one day.
So we stayed, it'll be 80 weeks on Monday.
Not a bad way to spend quarantine. I mean, I've never been to Thailand, but it doesn't sound bad.
Oh, it was not bad at all. And it was a good alternative for us. So we went up to Chiang Mai, which is in the north, which is almost like a sister city to Oaxaca. It's a huge valley with mountains surrounding it and a lot of different indigenous communities living in those mountains that both have relationships to mushrooms, but are also artisans and makers, because that is something that I'm really passionate about. And so while we were in Thailand, we almost started kickstarting what our life was going to be like in Oaxaca by just doing the things that we were interested in, but in Thailand instead of in Oaxaca. So I started working with a nonprofit of Hill Tribe artisans to try and give them some livelihoods, and we made face masks, we made other things I was getting involved in the artisan stuff.
It should be prefaced that Thailand shut completely, and like 30% of its economy is tourism.
Or more.
And these makers are making stuff for tourists to buy, and when new tourists were coming in, there's literally like no way to sell it.
Right.
And because of our global economy, a lot of artisans or collectives are tied to fair trade production or boutiques that carry them.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of artisans and fair trade collectives got really hit hard because everybody canceled their orders.
Right.
You know, it's
Nobody
like
was
the
shopping
economy, when the world stopped, it didn't just stop for us. It stopped for a lot of people who really depended on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to spend time with artisans working with them. And Zach started working on a Northern Thai cookbook, being the chef that he is.
Mm-hmm.
And we started spending time in the mountains with different communities where we spent time with Nong Yao and Kasim.
I made a couple videos about this.
Yeah, where that was red russellas.
Yeah, really into red russellas that were super delicious. And there was a couple, they prefer, I think what Kim was getting to is sort of the shock you asked us about and the difference.
Yeah.
They were really into amanitas and russellas and did not eat the horde mushrooms and were like nonplussed when I found a couple chanterelles. You know, and it was like, wait, what?
What?
And they have an amanita over there called Amanita Princeps, and for my money, it looks just like a death cap. Like the first time I saw one, I was with Kim and some friends. And I was like, hey, come check it out. There's a death cap. Let me show you how to recognize all of the features. And I said, it has marginated edge. Oh, there's not. I was like, it doesn't have marginated edges. It was marginated. I was like, you'll see that it's hollow, not pithy when you cut. Oh, it's pithy inside. You'll see that if you peel it off, it's a ball, but oh no, that's straight. That's what in the hell am I looking at? And it's one of their favorite edible mushrooms, and it's green and like green, like it's a death cap, except it's not. And there's piles of these in the outer markets of Chiang Mai during mushroom season.
Do they get death caps in that area? I know we say that death caps here are largely an import from Europe. Okay.
There were ochreata, like the pure white amanitas that we saw, but I didn't see, there were no death caps in this area. And also the Hmong people that fled during the Vietnam War to California are often the ones who have the death cap poisonings every year.
Interesting.
Because they look so much like the Princeps.
Yeah.
And I never was able to bring myself to eat one. I couldn't do it.
It highlights the locality of a lot of mushroom traditions too, which is natural, right? Because these are the biogeography of mushrooms are so different that, of course, the traditions around them on what's edible and all of that is also kind of hyper-localized. That knowledge is hyper-localized.
Yeah, and Nam Yao, while we were picking the red russellas, I mean, she found like a huge swath of them.
Oh, it was awesome.
Stoked.
Yeah.
And, you know, she starts picking them up and taking a bite out of each one of them.
To make sure it's chewing
them. And she's like, if there's a bit of spice, no. If it's smooth, yes. And so we're literally crawling through the field, just like taking little bites of each of the mushroom of the red russellas to see whether it was pica or or not.
That's such a bold method of testing. I know only one person stateside that I've heard do that. I'm sure there's more. But man, what a bold method of testing mushrooms. Not advised for any listeners. Don't start taking chomps out to test your mushrooms.
It should be said that no mushroom is toxic until it interacts with your liver. Which is really, actually, Alyssa pointed this out. Like compared to plants, there are plants like nettles down here, what they call malamujer, kind of nettles on crack. All kinds of plants that just by touching them, you know, you can cause yourself a serious problem. There's no mushroom that if you touch it, unless you have a particular allergy that I'm not aware of, that will actually cause you any harm. And the same thing goes with putting a little bit in your mouth and tasting it in the front of your mouth and spitting it out. There isn't a mushroom that will cause any toxicity for that as long as you're thoroughly spitting it out. I mean, even amanitas, you have to eat 3 or 4 ounces of that amanita and eat it and get it into your liver and digest it for it to really cause toxicity. Which is a great, I think that's really awesome for parents with kids. Can my kid touch this mushroom? Yes. You know, don't put it in your mouth, okay, right? But for adults that are going out there, being able to taste, especially with russellas, where you're not going to find a deadly lookalike, it's a great way to identify if that's something that you're going to take home or not.
But it is all local, you know, as we were talking about, like when we were in the Hmong village in Thailand, we found giant puffballs, like these giant puffballs that we were so stoked about. And so we picked them and we have these giant balls in our basket and we're coming out of the village and one of the women stops us and she goes, might die.
No
can. And
Mike and die.
Like,
Mike and die. No,
really? Like,
no can't eat.
These are puffballs. They're edible. And but she's like, you'll die,
She's
but we knew
She's
they're puffballs. So we did take them. We ate them. They were delicious.
We thrilled our vegan friends who had never seen them before, and we're having like chicken fried steak with puffball, and we're like, wait, what? We're like, yes, this is possible.
Or in the south of Thailand, they eat these.
I think it's a tilapia.
Purple mushrooms.
It's a purple white pour, and they even boil them 3 times before they eat them.
Yeah, from Kim's reaction.
It is the most bitter. Oh, it's so bad. It's the so most bitter.
It's so bitter.
It's so bitter. You know, like, and as a chef, I like new experiences. So I like boiled it 3 times, and I was like, I'm gonna eat some. And I was like, let me try again. Okay, no, I can do this. It was like, God, I can't do this. I didn't try it after I watched his reaction. So gross.
But for the women there, like they're like, this is a medicinal mushroom.
Yeah, there's like stalls with bags of them in the water cooked
for health.
Whoa.
You know, especially in COVID time, like everybody was like, eat these mushrooms.
Yeah, bitter.
Because they're bitter and they actually do have medicinal value. Just we would never want to eat them.
Yeah. Maybe a tincture in a smoothie, but God, who knows how to do that.
That is super interesting to think they're leaving behind puffballs and the tilapia is on the menu. Well, I just want to remind listeners, we're on 103.3 KPCA broadcasting out of Petaluma. We've got Kim and Zach Hunter with us, and we're talking about other cultures and their relationships with mushrooms. We're breaking some taboos. We're talking about how to test and identify mushrooms in new ways. And so this trip in Thailand is obviously expanding your horizons. I'm curious for you, Zach, you talk about making a cookbook. How did interacting both with new mushrooms to you and a new mushroom culture, maybe not the super bitter mushroom we're just talking about, but how did that influence your cooking practice? Because I know sometimes, with something like cooking, new inspirations can kind of change a lot.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I don't think I set out to necessarily write a full cookbook initially. I'd been writing down everything I'd made when we were in quarantine, and I was cooking there was 10 of us in the hotel during those first 6 weeks when everything was locked down. And so I just wrote down things I was cooking. There was a lot of Thai curry paste that I had seen before and all these vegetables. And that was at that time that they actually were cultivating split gill. And so it should be said that in Thailand, and this is not the same as Mexico, in Thailand there's usually 5 or 6 edible mushrooms, even off season, that are cultivated, at least.
Okay.
And then when it's the season, then they're bringing in a lot of the forage mushrooms, mostly in the outskirts of Chiang Mai. But I think just the idea of incorporating mushrooms like in almost every dish, like there's like the king oysters, and they have like these mini king oysters. They're really cute. You cut them in half and they're really nice. They have split gill mushrooms. There's shiitakes. In some of the more organic markets where there's lion's mane and reishi and all kinds of the medicinal mushrooms that you would find grown as well. So the cultivated side, I think, was especially coming from the U.S. where you have oyster, shiitake, and button mushrooms at your grocery store, right? To go into these markets and see like 5 or 6 or 7 varieties of cultivated mushrooms that were familiar somewhat, but then to see that that's just one of the things they put constantly. They're always eating mushrooms. And I think that was a big influence of being like, oh, right, you don't have to highlight the mushroom as the main part of the dish. It just goes in the dish, right? You just put it in the curry as one of your vegetables, right? And I think so that was a big influence because for me, and I'd been researching individual mushroom flavors, the volatile and non-volatile components, and like what makes a chanterelle taste like a chanterelle. Why does a porcini taste like a porcini? That's kind of been my specialty. Future book, perhaps.
Ooh, okay. I was about to ask more about that. Tell us the secrets of the chanterelle and porcini flavor.
Oh man, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I do a talk on that, and there may be a recorded version of on YouTube.
Very cool.
See if that's out there. But yeah, it was like in that sense of like how do you in the Western sense, it's often what flavors pair with this flavor. How do you highlight or how do you bring that out? In Thailand, it's very scattershot. They're just like put it all in the pot, spicy, sour, sweet, bitter, everything goes in there, and then you eat. Every bite is like wow, that's the whole thing. And so I think we pretty much, unlike a lot of our Western friends when we were there, we ate 95% of our food was Thai food, whether I made it or we went out for it. Whereas a lot of our friends were getting pizza and burgers and going out for, it's very Americanized or very Britishized, I suppose.
But it set us up very much for how we live here, and how most of the world lives. So, I didn't, or, something that we got to enjoy is, there is a market culture that is thriving in most places in the world because most people don't have huge refrigerators or storage. So they regularly shop at a market on a daily basis. So in Thailand and here in Oaxaca, there are market points where everybody brings their produce, proteins, everything else, where you come and you shop for the day. And so for us in Thailand, it was like going to the market in the morning, and that's where we learned our Thai and made friends with the ladies. And Zach found out more recipes or ingredients to explore for his cookbook, or even here, today is our weekly market down the street. And so we'll go and get all of our fruits and vegetables from those local vendors. And it's just a different way. It takes more time, but we're a lot more connected to our community, the local community, as well as sort of the food and things that are widely available.
It's funny because I know throughout this, we're going to be highlighting ways that other cultures can show us, different ways of being and maybe ways that are more enjoyable to live. And it's funny when I sit here in our town, I'm kind of involved in some small bits of city planning, and we're always figuring out how do you get people to gather, but how do you meet retail needs, and how do you specifically titrate and plan this out? And it's almost a very reductionist kind of trying to hyper plan really what's natural human activity. So when you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, open air markets that every culture does naturally. Maybe we have something to learn there.
Yeah, and ones that are affordable. It's not just your fancy farmer's market. It's sort of, just how do we make that more the norm? Or how do we, we talked about this earlier this week, could we have peace gardens where we start taking community blocks and, I think sometimes the best way to bring community together is to have something shared that you are able to work on, create together, cultivate. And so what if every family had their own little plot per block, and, how many blocks would it really take in a small town, to give each neighborhood their own peace garden where they come together and grow stuff or learn, or children can, for us, bringing kids mushroom hunting is such a joy.
Oh, it's the best. It's so awesome.
The excitement they get when they first find one, and then when they're really into it, they're great little mushroom hunters, probably better than, a truffle dog. But they're just so engaged. And we have parents that say, oh my gosh, my kids are now obsessed with, as we walk through the forest, what they're finding. And for me, that is really that's goal. A goal.
Well, and actually there is, and I can send you some links to a lot of the articles I found on the mushroom cultures of Oaxaca afterward, just so you can see what's available right now. And in Mixteca, where I was saying there's not a lot of places to stay out amongst the communities, there's a paper where they recorded that they have medicinal, edible, decorative, or spiritual, not decorative, but they're going off into space, and a thing called ludic purposes. And ludic is a term that means to play without purpose. And
I like that.
They recorded a historical use of mushrooms by the parents to say who can collect the biggest Earth star, or here, throw this puffball at your sister. And they recorded actual practices of the Mixteca ancient mushroom knowledge of enrolling children in nature by giving them games and using certain mushrooms as games. So there's no other purpose for them other than that. And that is a specific thing that they do, is enroll children in getting into nature. And I think that's, in some senses, it's kind of obvious. If you've ever been in nature with a child, it's pretty easy to get them enrolled. And yet at the same time, it's not something we practice a lot in the West.
Paired with the mycophobia that you were highlighting, where people are scared to let kids touch a mushroom, or there's so much for me around this because I have two small nieces, and some of my greatest memories, they've since moved up to Seattle, but some of my greatest memories with them were going out and flicking dust off a xylaria and walking through and just
puffball or
Yes.
Puffballs.
Yeah, they love that the Latin name is farting,
Yeah.
wolf fart.
Yeah, I was like, lycoperdon, it's a wolf fart. And I have a little 4-year-old who's just like, more farting mushrooms.
I remember, it's funny, I remember my guide in Oaxaca telling me this is pedo de lobo when he was showing me the puffball mushrooms. But yeah, there's so much there about getting kids introduced to nature, play without purpose. And one theme that I'm picking up, Zach, from some of the examples you're giving, both with cooking and with that play without purpose, is it's like a culture that's comfortable enough with mushrooms. Maybe this happens naturally over the course of your relationship with fungal organisms, but they're not sensationalized. So it doesn't have to be the center of every dish. It's not something that we're like, whoa, we found this mushroom. What do we do with it? It's like, no, let's go find them and throw them at each other. And I mean, it's just not some exceptionalized, sensationalized, or stigmatized part of nature. It's just part of nature. Let's get comfortable with these things. And
it's a part of nature. And it happens in season when the season happens, and you take advantage of that. And, that's the same here with insects. And it gets quite specific. There's coming up here soon, probably in the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to get our first really, really heavy rains. It usually is in the first week of June or so, traditionally here. And at that time, the leafcutter ants, who are also mushroom cultivators, they release all of their new queens, and they crawl out of the ground, and then they immediately start digging a hole, and they crawl back into the ground to create new nests. And for that 12-hour period, maybe 18-hour period, chicatanas, which are these large 1-inch long queen ants, are out of the ground for 1 day, maybe 2 days out of the whole year. And they are a delicacy here. And literally everyone is out of their houses with bags picking up these ants. On the day they come out, that is what is happening.
People are late to work. It's like
Chicatana Day. There's
in the streets. And if you're talking to some of the campesinos, so those are the farmers, they will be able to predict to the day. They'll say they're coming in 3 days.
that's wild.
Because they are tied into the cycles of nature here in ways that, we really lost touch with. And, being here now for 2 years, we're much more aligned with the cycles of nature because our water's dependent on it. The crops are dependent on it.
Yeah.
We've really become a lot more connected to this season.
Yeah. Even in Thailand, we are still living in the city. Here, we're rural. We live on the edge of the Sierra Norte mountains, and from our gate, we can walk up into the oak forest in the Sierra Norte mountains. This, other than Santa Cruz, this is the first place, the only other place I've lived where I can walk out and pick mushrooms from my door, which is, other than like city, whatever, but and it's pretty awesome. And what's interesting, and we'll see what happens this season, our particular town is mycophobic.
Ooh.
Nobody sells mushrooms in San Pablo at any of the markets, even during the season. And up in the forest right here, there are chanterelles, there are all kinds of boletes, there are laccaria, we found a couple romeria, and I'm hoping this year it'll change. I did find black trumpets 2 days before the rain stopped in 2022, and I was like, oh my God, and then it just went dry. I was like, oh! So there's a ton of really amazing, awesome edibles right here, accessible to the community.
Yeah.
And so one of our tasks this year is contacting the forest manager and one of the community members who manages a lot of these things and getting permission to pick mushrooms. Because that's one of the interesting things in Mexico is the forests belong to the communities. Everything extracted from the forest belongs to the communities. And it's not like one guy who can give you permission. They have to call a town meeting, ask everybody if it's okay that we go with our guide and extract mushrooms. And then in some cases, they're like, yes, and you can do that if
we provide a species list.
You typically teach them cultivation or there's some exchange. And this is the principle of Galagetza, where it's like everything that is given it's not, I wouldn't say conditional, but it's expected that you give something back. And that is a really amazing way. Kim was actually talking about it yesterday. If you knew that everything that you brought to the party over your entire lifetime and everything that your parents brought and everything your children brought was recorded, would you behave differently? Right? Because that's how they do it. There are ledgers here going back hundreds of years.
That's amazing, because one of the things is a very Western concept, and I'm forgetting the economist right now who came up with it, but the tragedy of the commons, where what happens when we leave these landscapes to everybody and it's not owned by one person is it just all deteriorates. And it's actually a pretty simple answer, is you hold people accountable and make a whole ethos around, hey, if you're going to take something, you give something. It's actually a lot more simple than I think we've like wrestled with this for hundreds of years, and they've thought of a pretty elegant solution.
Yeah. And, you were mentioning earlier you wanted to chat about forest management and,
Yes. And you guys segued us beautifully into this conversation. Right when you said there's a forest manager, I was like, yes, perfect. Talk about how forests are managed, what that dynamic is like. And my brain immediately thinks, how do they sit with local governments? How does all that work?
Well, Oaxaca has, 10,000
Pueblos.
Pueblos. Majority of them are independent and autonomous from the federal government.
I think it's 530 municipalities, which are considered counties. Basically, think of them as counties. And of those, like 480 are autonomous and independent, which means
530 counties is insane.
Yeah. I mean,
in Oaxaca, the state of Oaxaca.
State of Oaxaca
just
only.
the state of Oaxaca.
Just the state.
And then within those, that means they run their own fire, their own police, their own water, their own electricity, their own sewer. They do everything.
And normally it's 2 or 3 year terms. So the community meets and will assign the roles to someone from each household represents the families to participate in the community. And they will designate who's going to be on community police, who's going to be on waste, who's responsible for water, who's managing the weekly market, logistics with the vendors, all of these things.
And these aren't paid positions.
And they're not paid positions, but they are your responsibility for being a part of the community. And sometimes that might just be 1 week out of the month, or, it depends. The time commitment depends on the job. But then at 65 is normally the last, is the age limit to which you serve in leadership. So the elders in the community will be at that stage. But then again, after 2 to 3 years, the baton is passed to the next group that's on its way up. Mm-hmm. And so if you might have been the community police officer at one point, and then you were this, and then you were that. So imagine how different a community might function if that was how we all participated.
We have a lot to learn with that cycling and passing the mic to other people coming up. Boy, looking at our political landscape, we have a lot to learn from that.
Well, and compulsory service, too, I think is important. And, I asked Sam, I was like, explain to me. Sam is a good friend of ours who we met in 2019, who is a partner, who's the Zapotec weaver.
He also married us.
He was our minister.
Oh my God.
And I was talking to her, and I was like, okay, I know a lot of communities in Oregon and in Australia that I've met over the years, and like these intentional communities, as we like to call them. Right. And for the most part, if it's a democratic consensus, things break down really quickly, because a democratic consensus where you have to have everyone agree before you leave the meeting empowers the most cantankerous or the least agreeable person to hold everything up until they get their demands met. And I asked Sam, I was like, so how do you deal with that? And he's like, oh, that's easy. Everyone decides your job but you. And I was like, that's brilliant.
So it sounds like so-and-so, you've taken a real interest in the trash situation. So it seems like you may be the best person to take the lead on that for the next 2 years.
And then we all vote. Yes, we all voted you in. Yeah. You were the trash man now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it also means Sam. So Sam is a Zapotec weaver in Dyer that lives in Teotitlan. He's just now about to complete his two years term as a police officer. But, he also is the primary sort of English speaker for the family, and also used to go and travel a lot to help sell the family's rugs
in the United States. Trade shows.
And so for the last 2 years, he's really had to shift his schedule. He can't leave to go and do that. Or there is an exception where he can hire somebody from the community to take his place for that shift.
But he has to pay them.
And he can't do that too often.
Right.
You know, but just really fascinating, and also with land management. So, you know, the communities are in the forests here are responsible for managing the land, and up in the Sierra Nortes, because of a mass sort of deforestation 100 years ago that was then reforested and with all pines.
The Western monocrop.
We are seeing a lumber industry emerge for lumber that's infested with pine beetles, because if you plant too many of one thing, then the pests find their food. So the consequence of these pine beetles now is creating a lumber industry to help them clear those out of the forest, and it's also opening up new space for the next growth of the forest to come. So now
which
we're
aren't
seeing
necessarily pine.
Yeah, so now we're seeing more oaks and
More mixed
other
forest.
ones coming in, and that's because they're managing it, and it's the community that's responsible for it. I mean, they don't fight fires here with water. They use dry firefighting. And when each community has a fire, like, again, a committee that's basically like the firefighting brigade. And when the bells go off, everyone runs to the fire.
Yeah.
To me, a lot of this speaks to the powerful influence of cultural norms and kind of strong cultural identity and traditions passed down, because so much of our society, everything has to be written down, everything is enforced via contract, everything has to be kind of wheels greased by money to make sure anything happens. And I think largely, and this is nothing new to listeners of this show, and I think anyone living in the States or the Western world, is we feel like we're a little divorced from what is our cultural baseline. I mean, what are our values? What are our cultural traditions? I don't know that we have a firm grasp on that. And from what I'm hearing, and you may be able to correct me, say, no, their contracts, all this is, but it sounds like this is mostly enforced kind of culturally and with community, the roles passed around. This is just what the community does. And that builds this really unique structure that I like a lot of what I'm hearing about.
Well, I would say for sure social contracts, in the sense that there's some understood agreements. And a counter example would be that in Teotihuacan, where we were just talking about with Sam, a couple of years ago, the person who had been brought on to be the mayor, and that job, Sam explained to me, requires both the mayor and both of the two underlings to all agree on something to make it go forward, so that there can't be one person who corrupts the system.
Right.
But he managed to corrupt the two people under him. And as a result, the community revoked their land rights.
Ooh.
And so the social contract in that sense is like, well, if you're going to not play part of the community can just be like, you know what, this land now belongs to this other family. Because it's not your land. You know, you have a contract to be there for the community, and the community will be there for you. But if that's broken, you can be kicked out. Permanently.
Yeah. Or in our like circumstances, you know, we are visitors to these communities. So for us, you know, we want to make sure that every time we come and visit, or when we bring a group, that we are also fulfilling any social contract that we've created with the communities. So not only is that getting permission to forage, but in one community, they had asked for cultivation workshops. So the following year, we brought a Mexican mycologist, and were able to do a full cultivation workshop in Spanish for all the families in that village. We also have an ID table, and you know, all of our trips have mycologists on them. Yeah. So not only are we asking the locals to bring their knowledge, but we're also reciprocating by bringing a mycologist that can then also do a table talk in each of these communities. Mm-hmm. So it's not that these communities have to travel to a festival to participate. It's that in us coming to those communities with our small groups, we create our own sort of mushroom event where we really try and share as much of what we are educating our participants as well as the community members. And
we should say we're not heroes. We're not the only ones doing this. Our friend Celestino, who we work with as our guide, who's a member up there, just recently put out a glossy, incredible book of biodiversity of everything but mushrooms for the community specifically with the University of Pennsylvania, where he got a lot of funding, and it's just absolutely stunning. This is what's in your forest book from a very small little hillside. So there's that interest is happening, and It's
Or
really
like happy to be part of an ecosystem that's, bringing in like both experts locally as well as from abroad to elevate the beauty of this area and the science and the mushrooms.
And you hit on one of the questions I was going to have, which is about, as someone who's westernized from the States. Now, obviously, you guys have kind of dove into other cultures and I think have a pretty, unique attitude or an attitude pretty conducive to working with communities and not being extractive. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing. And it sounds like that's a big consideration in how you're structuring events and how you're putting together, operating as kind of like mushroom promoters or people leading mushroom tours, is how to do this in a way that is reciprocal. And I mean, if you're getting direct permission from the community and working with them to put it together, that's kind of the ultimate level of that. I was curious and just making sure I understood some basic parts. The counties we were talking about, the communities you're in, are these, quote unquote, indigenous? Are these largely social structures that are from the same people that have been there for centuries to millennia? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, it depends on the community and the mountain range. So there are some of the communities in the Sierra Nortes. We have 16 different indigenous groups in Oaxaca. There are
as language groups.
Like language groups. And so we have like the Zapotec. So the Zapotecs are in the valley. Well, there's just a lot here in Oaxaca. So each village has their own way of operating. Mm-hmm. And
I think the Mancomunados are unique in the sense that it's a 250,000 acre collective of 8 different towns that all work together to manage their forest together and to mutually benefit one another. And so and I think that's what Celestino has been doing guiding now for 13 years. Mm-hmm. And he has now been traveling to other states in Mexico to help them set up similar programs and create ecotourism. So because what you need is to be able to bring people to the woods and give them a place to stay in order to even enroll your community in that sort of interaction, right?
But I think circling back to this question on sort of the indigenous components of Oaxaca is, I mean, these are like Sam's family, like Sam will trace his story back to sort of the Ice Age in these valleys from their family. And Teotitlan was founded formally in 500 BC, is the town in which he lives, and we spent some time. In the Sierra Sur, where we're going to be doing our mycolories, which is mushroom foraging and dyeing. So we'll be actually creating a rainbow of color with the mushrooms we find. In the Sierra Sur, where we stay, a lot of those towns were founded during the Mexican Civil War or Revolution. During the Revolution. Mm-hmm. So
early 1900s.
In the early 1900s, when there was conflict, a lot of folks ended up fleeing from the valleys into the mountains, and that also happened when the Spanish came in the 1500s. So there are different stories for each of these different towns and how they've come to be.
Well, for example, let's say La Tuvi is a town in these eight towns. It has a Zapotec name, whereas most towns have the Nahuatl, the Aztec name. And Celestino explained that actually means it's newer because it was founded after the Spanish came around and the Aztecs had them name all the towns. So it means that they actually founded their town since that time and have been able to keep the Zapotec and have the Zapotec name. Where if it's named in Nahuatl, it's probably an older town.
Because most Americans just think about Mexico and the Aztecs.
Right.
The Aztecs were super new to the scene in terms of Mesoamerican civilizations when they came and basically kind of like swept through and took Mesoamerica and Mexico. That's why it's the Mexicas, like that is the Aztecs. But, our friend Sam would say, the Zapotecs were here for thousands of years before the Aztecs kind of came down. And so the Aztecs came and then the Spanish came.
Pretty rapid fire succession if you consider historical time.
Only 200 years the Aztecs kind of basically came in, whereas, Monte Alban was the mountain where Monte Alban is in Oaxaca was being flattened in 300 BC to build that site.
It's such a rich and fascinating history. And when you just laid that out, that's part of the reason that Spanish colonization was possible, because they were able to activate these other tribes who were no big fans of the Mexica or the Aztecs.
Right.
I just want to remind people that we're broadcasting on 103.3 KPCA in Petaluma. You're listening to the Mushroom Hour. We're with Kim and Zach Hunter talking about mushroom culture in Oaxaca, Mexico, talking about some of the history of Oaxaca. Really a fascinating conversation. And I'm just impressed with how much you guys, in just your time being there, I mean, you said you fell in love with Oaxaca, and that is obviously apparent with kind of your understanding of the history and just obviously your deep interest in participating and learning from these cultures.
I'd like to invite anyone that has any corrections as well to get in contact with us and let us know if we've said anything erroneously, because,
Good caveat.
We are white people that have come to Oaxaca, and while we have made really good inroads with a lot of these communities, we are who we are. So if there is anything that we've said that's erroneous or wrong, and I'm sure the numbers of the municipalities are probably wrong, but it's in that range. But please let us know. We're open.
The reason why, I fell in love with mushrooms when I fell in love with Zach. But before that, I was working in community organizing, environmental nonprofits. And, when
It's being corrected.
Well, and I think Darren, really, we're passionate because we see the value in the way people live here. And think about how these communities live. And when we can bring people through the Fungivore to experience these communities and slow down, we can just learn so much, and I think I just have such deep respect for these cultures where I've had the opportunity to also slow down and just embrace the presence when we can do that. And what a different world might look like if we could sort of embody more of how, what if instead of consumption culture or what was the last thing you bought, it was I'm getting my garden going, or what was the last thing you made, or how could, and I think there is an emerging culture of people. You're part of it, we're part of it. We're all wanting to some ways get back to the old ways where
the purpose was life. I think
the purpose is living life.
Being alive and doing things, not saving up for some future potential life that you may have somewhere in the future, right? I think we mentioned, I mentioned on our last phone call the story of the fisherman, right? It's you could just keep building your business and eventually retire and spend time with your family. It's man, I'm already spending time with my family every day. Why do I need to get bigger and bigger and be capitalist and be capitalized? Sorry, capitalism. I can't say that word right now.
No, that's right. That's right. No, and it highlights so much there. And as you were talking, Kim, I was and I think people in our world today are hungry for it. And then I had to kind of slow down and think, well, that's part of it, as I also don't want to go there and consume and show me all of your culture and let me take that. And so I like that you guys are finding this dance where you're trying to be participatory, learn from it, show people, but then also find ways that this is adding value to those communities. And one thing I was thinking when you talked about, is it Celestine?
Celestino.
Yeah.
Celestino. Celestino taking some practices from one community and then bringing it to another. So maybe there's a role for some folks from the outside to see things one community is doing. Hey, we really appreciated you bringing us in. Now we've actually been able to just bring your story or directly put you in contact with another community that's not too distant from you that can learn from you. So there's an interesting dance there that I think you guys are exploring that is really critical for us to kind of take on these learnings and these ways of life without it being something where it feels like we're taking something from them.
And we're really visiting these communities on their terms.
Right.
And I think that's what's important. Even in our sort of application form, we're sort of you need to acknowledge that we are going into mountain communities that are managing all of their own infrastructure. So if there's a storm and the power goes out, everyone's going to be working to get that back on because they all would like power. But, it is not, they're not doing it just for you to get your lights back on so you can plug in your phone, So I think that it's really it's a great opportunity to invite people to slow down. It's not a race. We're not trying to forage the forest and get as many mushrooms as we can. It's about the process. And when you're on a walk with Sonia and Marta, who's the village herbalist as well as the mushroom woman, you don't want to be running ahead trying to find that next mushroom. You want to be walking with these women, because what they're sharing in your time together is so much more than just what you're going to find and put in your basket, you know? And I think that's really what I want to leave, like, you know, people with, is when they come, that they're looking at how they can be more present and in the process, and what we can learn from other people and from each other about ourselves when we slow down and just and give ourselves that opportunity.
And your role as someone who's visiting to also share and give good energy, right? You can be there as a visitor. There's a great role for visitors to give great energy and be happy and interact, and that gives something to people. So I 100% agree with that, you know, a lot of these things, it's not about, especially mushroom hunting, it's not about running and picking everything that you can. I know, you know, caveat, commercial scenarios, people do it for a living. I get it. But
or if
to
I
go
find
there
dye mushrooms, I'm on it. You know, I'm like,
that's right. But there's also a role to interact with the people you're with, and that's part of the process. And you know, Zach, you brought it up a couple times. The 8 communities that manage this massive area of forest. We'll put links to kind of the articles and everything that describe that in a little more depth. But just what has it been like for you guys to experience those forests? Because I read about, you know, the forest fire levels haven't gone up when so much of the world has. They're rich, they're biodiverse. But what is the feeling of entering and being in those forests that are managed at kind of this community level?
Oh, gosh.
I would just say it depends on the mountain range, but it's magical.
I mean, I would say, as someone who thought of Mexico as desert and beaches, finding pine forests and fir forests and oak forests at very high altitudes was in itself shocking. There's one spot that we picked that was at 10,700 feet. And being from Oregon, I'm like, this is so bizarre. I'm 500 feet below the top of Mount Hood, you know, which is like our super tall mountain that's bald from 4,000 feet up. And I am picking mushrooms in a fir forest that's been clearly managed and is just so much diversity. And I think you really get the joy. You really get to absorb some of the joy of the people that are living there, because it's just living. I mean, it's just this way of living that's just being alive and being, you know, I say that wonder is contagious and does not require any shared language. You know, just like showing up with genuine wonder and being like, whoa, someone else is like, whoa, you know, and that's it. You're connected.
And you don't have to speak the same language to do that, you know, and I think that's the beauty of, like, when you can find things that you can share and connect with others on. It doesn't matter the language you speak. It's really what you love. Like, we were just in a new community 3 days ago, just on a hike, just to see what was happening, and met all the folks who worked at the Ecotourism, because it's a small village of 200 people. And, you know, met the wife of the man who managed the waterfall entry as we were walking. And she said, oh, my husband's over there, say hi, because we were complimenting her garden growing on a mountainside. And then we get there and chat with him, and his brother loves mushrooms. So Zach says he's a mushroom guy, and all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, you've got to meet my brother. Yeah. And so we come up from the waterfall, and then the brothers are there, and we're exchanging WhatsApps, because the mushrooms for them are going to come in a few weeks. And he wants Zach to come, and they want to hunt and cook mushrooms
He wants to learn new techniques of cooking. He's like, I know everything I know. And he's like, I'll take you to all the spots if you show me how to cook. I'm like, sold. Like, I'm in.
I want on that deal.
Love it. Like, let's go have mushrooms together.
And that should be said that we have now gotten to the point where we can converse in Spanish, which makes a huge difference. Like, you may not need to know the similar language to share wonder, but gosh, it helps a lot to have the language now where we can have a conversation about cooking techniques or what the season is, or how, you know, what to look for and how to describe what the hunt looks like. Something that I wanted to mention is that you had asked about interacting with these communities. Sort of for us, you know, this is now our 5th year doing this, and it's really come down to being invited. You know, in the Cuajimoloyas Mushroom Festival, a lot of communities from all over come together to showcase their artworks and whatnot, and we'll be there, and then somebody will say, hey, have you met so-and-so? And they're like, oh, well, you do mushroom dyes? Come hang out in our village and show us what you're doing. And it's like, okay, now that we've been invited, that's a whole different way of approaching something.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this one because this is a community in the Sierra Nortes that has not explored their forests.
They're not part of the 8
mushrooms.
communities. They're further out than the 8 communities.
But they have a silk sanctuary there where they hand raise and grow their own silkworms and spin it and weave it on a backstrap loom, and then they use natural dyes that they collect to dye these incredible silk pieces. And I've been working with this community through some of my other artisan work, and as well as through the Mushroom Festival, because their guys met Zach and said, we want to do more stuff. And so this year, in late August, we're bringing Alyssa Allen from Mycopigments in Seattle back to Oaxaca, and we're going to spend a week up in the Sierra Nortes foraging for dye mushrooms. One of those days we will be with that community so that they can learn more about it. And then we're going to spend a day at the Silk Sanctuary with our mushrooms doing an intercambio. So our participants get to learn about the silk as well as their natural dyeing. But then we have Alyssa with us, as well as I've been studying now under her for the last few years. Then we'll get to bring the mushrooms that we found from their forest,
which they don't know about,
which they don't work with yet, and just demonstrate the colors that we can achieve with mushrooms that are in their area. So it's sort of this is just sort of an exchange in which they're very interested in this and natural dyes, and now we have the opportunity to bring in mushrooms from their forest to also be part of their what they can offer, maybe if they like to, if they want to too. Right. It's
not you have to learn this.
All I'm doing is saying, here's what we are doing, and if I can ever be of help, please let me know.
Yeah.
And you guys are on a beautiful path. I think of stewardship, we think of reciprocity, we think of indigenous wisdom, we think of, sharing across cultural boundaries. I mean, there's so much good that you guys are doing. Where can people find more information and get connected?
Oh, sure. You can go to thefungivore.com. And the one caveat for following on Instagram, it's _Fungivore at Instagram. But there's a ton of information about the various communities that we work with and the trips that we've organized. And of course, anyone is more than, if they'd like to have a conversation, info@thefungivore.com. Email us. We're always open to talk to people. We love hearing from folks. So that's a great place to get more information on just about everything.
Yeah, we have a few spots left on our culinary as well as our mushroom dyeing tours this summer.
In the Sierra Norte,
And also looking forward to, continuing to work with clubs, and we're also working with the North American Mycological Association this year. Just really excited to keep mushrooming with other lovers.
I'm sure for people listening, I mean, if you needed an excuse to go to Oaxaca, or you were going to Oaxaca and wanted to engage in mushroom culture, I think you guys are a fabulous touchstone. And of course, we've just kind of scratched the surface. So please go and connect with the Fungivore. And I want to remind listeners on 103.3 KPCA, this has been the Mushroom Hour. We've been sitting with Kim and Zach Hunter in Oaxaca, Mexico, and their group, the Fungivore, and all the great work they're doing. You can find more episodes of the Mushroom Hour at welcometomushroomhour.com, where we'll also have the links from this episode so you can connect. But Kim and Zach, thank you so much for joining us on the show. A fascinating, stimulating, great conversation.
Well, thank you so much
for having us.
It's been
a pleasure.
Yeah, really great.